All right, so the first step on our backend in making sure that users can't access and modify other users' data is going to be to basically take this ID that we're including with all of our requests now. Let me just open up our useauth request file that we created. Okay, so remember, this is the custom hook we created that basically takes all of the common requests such as get, post, put, delete, and it automatically adds the auth token of the currently logged in user to that request. Now, essentially what we're going to do on the server side, and we've seen this before, so it's not anything new, although this is absolutely going to be a new situation that we're using it in. What we're going to do, let's just open up our list notes route as an example. What we're going to have to do is whenever a user makes that request, we're going to have our server take a look at that ID token that was included, right? So that'll be in headers.auth token. And essentially our server is going to take a look at this and see if it's valid first of all, right? Because if it's not valid, that means that the user probably tried to change something about the data that the token contains. And second of all, we're going to need to make sure that even if it is valid, this is the token for the user that we're trying to modify the data for, right? So in other words, this token here could be valid, but it turns out it's for user number 123 when the request is trying to modify user 234's data, right? Or trying to delete some notes or trying to view those notes, etc. So anyway, that's what we're going to do for each of our routes. We're going to make sure that the auth token is valid. And to do that, we're just going to convert our list notes route first. And to do that, we're going to have to first import Firebase admin into here so that we can verify that data. So for that, we're going to say import all as admin from Firebase admin. And then down here inside the handler for this route, we're going to get the auth token that the user included in their request. Now we're going to do this before we even access anything else because this is by far the most important thing. If a user doesn't have a valid auth token, then something's wrong. They're probably trying to hack the server, so we just want to send them away as quickly as possible. All right, so to do that, we're going to say const auth token equals request.headers. That's the auth token property that we included in the headers. And then to verify it, you might remember this from earlier, we're going to say const user equals await admin.auth.verify ID token, and then we're going to pass that auth token that was included in the header to this as an argument. So essentially what this is doing is it's taking the encoded ID token, which the user included along with the request, right? It's a big long string as we saw earlier, and it's basically decoding that and turning that into the user information that we can use now inside our server route. So we are going to want to wrap this in a try-catch block, because if the token is not valid, what's going to happen is this will throw an error. So let's put that inside here, and then we're going to say catch. We're going to catch the error. And if there is an error, then that means that the ID token isn't valid, so we're going to send back the status code 401, which, as you may remember, means that this is not a valid request for auth reasons. So now that we've done that, right, now that we've gotten this user thing, we're going to have to put the rest of our logic inside of here, actually. So we'll just do it like that. And once we've verified that the user's auth token is valid, the next thing we have to do, as I said, is make sure that the user is trying to read their own notes here, right? So here's what that's going to look like. After we've gotten the user ID from the request parameters, we're going to say if user.uid does not equal user ID, right? So in other words, if the user is trying to access another user's data, then what we're going to do is say response.send, and we're going to send back a 403 status code. For that, we're going to say send status, actually. And that will basically tell the client side that the request was valid, right? The auth token was valid, but that user isn't allowed to access that piece of data. So that's what that means right there. And once we've done that, we should be pretty good to go. The one thing that's going to cause problems here right now is the fact that we have two things called user. So let's rename this one to auth user, right? That's the Firebase auth user that's been decoded there. So we'll say auth user, and then we'll say auth user.uid. And then we're going to load the user, get the notes for the user, and we're going to send that back to the client just like before. So if we test out this list notes route everything should work just like it worked before, except now it's much more protected, right, as I'll demonstrate. So let's make sure our application is running. We're going to do that with npm run dev. And once our front end starts up, it should correctly load those notes. Now, in order to prove that this will block other users and unauthenticated users from accessing this information, let's go over to Postman. And what I'm going to try and do is send this same request, which is getting all of the notes for this user with the ID we set up. And if we take a look at our headers, there's no auth headers or anything there. So let's click send now, and this is going to try and make this request to our server. And what we'll see is that we get back this 401 unauthorized status code, okay? So the next thing we're going to do here, well, just to show you how this is actually working behind the scenes in a little more detail, if we open up our console, or our network tab actually, and make some sort of request, which you can do just by refreshing the page, that should give us this notes request. If you copy this auth token here, which I'm going to do just by, you can actually just right click here and say copy value. If we go into headers now and add a header that says auth token, and then paste that big auth token there, and you also have to check this checkbox here, just make sure you do that, because I was a little confused why it wasn't working the first time I did it. So now if we click on send, what we're going to see is that we get back all of the notes for that user. Okay, now if we were to put in the ID token of a different user into here, which we don't currently have, that's something we'll take a look at a little later on. But if we were to do that, we would see the 403 status code coming from our server, meaning that yes, our ID token is valid, but no, we're not allowed to access that information. So anyway, that's how all of that works, and we've now protected our list notes endpoint so that users can only access their own notes. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.